At the turn of the century, we were all living La Vida Loca, worrying about the impending Y2K bug that would affect the world's computers by making them think it was 1900 instead of the year 2000, which would cause banks to collapse, nuclear power plants to malfunction, and companies to disappear overnight. Doomsday was upon us and we could all only accept our fate. But as the clock struck midnight, nothing happened. No chaos, no destruction of society. We were free to keep living our lives the way that we wanted it. And much to my personal happiness, video games would continue. I would be able to still fire up a console, plug in a controller, insert a disc, and lose myself for hours. Thankfully, I would be able to continue my favorite hobby, baby, one more time. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Goldcoin Mountain. Today, I'll be starting a series taking you through years of gaming, and I'll be starting with the year 2000. If that sounds like a journey you want to go on, please consider subscribing. Also, like, share, comment, all that fun stuff because it helps me get seen by more people. But with that all out of the way, let's get right into it. As we entered the millennium, three companies had a strong hold in the video game market. Sony had the original PlayStation that was just over 5 years old, Nintendo had the N64 that was 4 years old at the time, and Sega with its Dreamcast that released on 9/9/99. And at first did quite well, selling over 1 million units in its first 2.5 months, making it the fastest selling console in North America at the time. But Sony would have their ace in the hole later that year, and Nintendo was busy working on a project for another year. No one knew exactly how it would play out, but we were all interested to see. For me, it was my mid-teen years and everything that goes along with it. Puberty, hormones, not wanting to be seen with your parents, you know, the usual. I worked at a movie theater, taking tickets, sweeping up popcorn left over after people had watched X-Men, sneaking friends in the back door to see movies for free, and even having it down to a science when me and a few coworkers should walk into the theater that was showing the movie The Gift just for a minute, just to get a look at Katie Holmes take her top off. It was then that I knew that she would be my future wife, and I couldn't wait to grow up and be with her. And then came this fucking guy. But when I wasn't working or attending high school or playing sports, you could find me in my room or at a friend's house enjoying some home console gaming. A quick note that any release dates mentioned are the North American releases because, well, that's where I'm from. Just after the new year, in the dead of winter when 70% of my school was wearing tech vests from Old Navy, it would be the Dreamcast that got the ball rolling with Crazy Taxi on January 24th. This fantastic game had you playing as a taxi driver, trying to get people to their destinations as quick as possible, while also earning tips for crazy stunts. As it turns out, I tried this in real life a few years ago while working for Uber as a way to earn some extra cash, and people didn't tip. I have no idea why. But anyway, this game was a blast to play by yourself or with friends, all while listening to recognizable bands from the 90s. On the same day, Nintendo would bring out Mario Party 2, which was seen as a solid improvement over the first, but the knock on it, which is the knock on most Mario Party games, was that it relied too much on random luck. But for a 4-player party game in 2000, this was definitely something to put on with your buddies in between eating processed-to-death pizza rolls and drinking copious amounts of Mountain Dew. N64 would keep releasing solid games with Pokemon Stadium in February and Kirby's first attempt at a 3D adventure with Crystal Shards in March. And then in April, Nintendo would come with the Big Daddy when they would release The Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask for the N64. And I want to preface this real quick by pointing out that I am not as high on this game as a lot of people are, but in all honesty, it was just too big of a release to leave out. If you don't know, the game features a time mechanic where a moon is on a collision course with Termina. You have 72 hours in-game to stop it from happening, which translates to almost an hour of real time, and if you don't, well, kaboom goes the moon, and Link will have to start all over at the first day. Luckily, at the very least, you'll retain some things even if you have to start over, like masks or weapons, but to me this is just an infuriating game mechanic that kept me from ever finishing the game, or to be perfectly honest, ever wanting to. It's funny to look at the contrast of Breath of the Wild now, where you have Zelda saying, "Link, help! I can't hold him much longer." Meanwhile, I'm just climbing a mountain or doing random ass shrines to get a better looking outfit. And the story or time doesn't really progress until you do, and to me that's how it should be. Majora's Mask seems like it's forcing you, and that's what makes it one of the most divisive Zelda games of all time. As we moved into the spring and summer, the frosted tips and cargo shorts were starting to make their return from its winter hibernation. And through the next couple of months there would be a steady stream of very good games from Nintendo, and it really seemed like they were hitting their stride on the N64, with games like Excitebike 64 and Perfect Dark, the fantastic first-person shooter. And then a whole bunch of games that I never played and know absolutely nothing about on other systems, and oh, hold on. Tomb Raider got a game on the Game Boy Color? I was today years old when I found that out. Anyway, the temperature was really heating up at the end of June, and so was the Dreamcast with Jet Set Radio, also called Jet Grind Radio. Apparently, there was some kind of copyright thing back then, and that's why it's different. But yeah. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2 releasing on the same day. Just like the massively talented Nicolas Cage had said in Gone in 60 Seconds earlier that month.
Okay, let's ride.
Jet Set Radio had you riding rollerblades or inline skates if you're more comfortable with that, and tagging different areas with graffiti while competing against rival tagging gangs. That might not sound all that appealing, but it's actually a hell of a time cruising through the open world on your skates and unrealistically jumping 15 feet in the air. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is a fighting game with a bunch of, you guessed it, Marvel and Capcom characters. And like every other fighting game in my life, I was absolutely horrible at it, but there was fun to be had, especially with other people around. By the time August had come around, Nintendo was ready to give the world a glimpse at the N64's successor as Nintendo showed off the GameCube in Japan at a press conference on the 25th. There was an elaborate presentation showing off the Cube and controller for the first time, and numerous sizzle reels of games that were going to release, and also just some concept art for famous Nintendo characters. Nintendo's next console was upon us, but it would still be over a year until it released. But Nintendo wasn't quite done with the N64 yet, as just 3 days later, Mario Tennis was released to rave reviews from almost everyone. Just over a year after the successful Mario Golf, Nintendo called on Camelot again to bring Mario and his friends to the court. Well, maybe they're not all his friends, but they were coming along anyway. Including Waluigi, as this is his debut in a Mario game. And he looks just as terrifying as Wario did in Mario Golf. You could have 4 people playing at the same time, and the ball physics in a game from 2000 were pretty spectacular, and even hold up pretty well to this day. You could also have fun in single player playing against the CPU, but once you progressed in tournament mode, the CPU turned into Roger Federer in his prime. Wait, this is about the year 2000, so who was a good tennis player then? Hell, who was any tennis player then? Oh, how about Anna Kournikova? She was supposed to be my second wife after Katie Holmes inevitably left me. But anyway, this was made at a time where video games were supposed to be really hard, and at the higher levels of it, it was. September was a month that had an all-time great in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, the skateboarding game that had you doing a bunch of flips and tricks and listening to awesome music. And then there was mostly nothing else, unless you're a huge fan of The Little Mermaid 2 Pinball Frenzy. And why wouldn't you be? Because nothing quite goes together like fish women and pinball. But in October, a huge moment in gaming history would show itself, though we didn't know it yet. Yes, it was the PlayStation 2 releasing in North America on the 26th. Over its lifespan, it would become the highest selling console ever, and it got off to a great start, selling over 500,000 units in its first day, making it the fastest selling console ever, and by the end of the year had sold 1.5 million in North America and 6.4 million worldwide. Sony had a massive hit on its hands. And to be perfectly honest, it's easy to question why, because the launch lineup shown here was really nothing special. However, one did stand out, as I absolutely loved Madden 2001. It was a huge upgrade over the blocky, jagged football players from the PS1 and N64. Not only did it look better, it had the gameplay to match, with an addicting franchise mode and realistic animations. This was back when EA still had competition in NFL games, like NFL 2K1 for the Dreamcast, which was a heck of an up-and-coming football game in its own right. And that competition pushed EA to make Madden great every year, and they nailed this first iteration on the PS2. Complete with an awesome intro song by Exhibit created specifically for it. I liked it so much I even had it on a burnt CD to listen to on my Walkman. And I'll pause for just a few seconds so the youngsters can Google burnt CD and Walkman. The following month in November would see the release of Banjo-Tooie on N64. However, 3 days before that was a game that I probably have the most memories from in that year. It was the year of 2000, and nothing was bigger for a teenage boy than the WWF, now the WWE. It was the Attitude Era with The Rock, Stone Cold, Triple H, The Undertaker, Vince and Shane. Hell, just 2 years prior, Undertaker had thrown Mick Foley off the top of a cage into a broadcast table, only to bring him back up there and throw him through the top of the cage down onto the ring. And the WWF was still riding momentum into 2000 when they released WWF No Mercy on November 20th. The year prior saw the release of WrestleMania 2000, which was a great game on its own, but with No Mercy, it was everything that WrestleMania had, but with just more polish and features. Made by the AKI Corporation that most people would agree are responsible for the best wrestling games ever created, pulled out all the stops and made just a flat out addicting game. The SmackDown Mall where you could spend in-game currency to unlock wrestlers, moves, costumes, pretty much anything you wanted. The career mode, which had different paths you could choose based on player decisions. And let's not forget the newly added ladder match and the ability to brawl backstage. There was nothing like getting a group of friends together and playing this until the wee hours of the morning, all while screaming at each other, and then having, the parents scream at you guys because they have to work the next day. But it was all part of the experience, and it's likely one I'm never going to forget. The rest of the year would see some releases, but nothing that really jumps out at you, and also it was right before Christmas, so you couldn't just really ask your parents to get you a game then. You knew what the answer would be. However, let's give credit where credit's due because Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker was released on December 13th, and it is the lowest rated game on Metacritic for the entire year. That's no easy feat, and it deserves to be recognized. So with the year mostly over, we would turn our attention to 2001, where Nintendo's announced console of 2000 would make its way to store shelves. Sega, who had its numbers torpedoed by the launch of the PS2, would decide to get out of the console business altogether. And a newcomer would break into the party and emerge as Sony's top competition. And we'll cover it all and everything in between when I return for part 2 of this series. I really hope you enjoyed this look at gaming in 2000, and I sincerely hope that you'll join me for all future episodes. Thank you so much for watching.